Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome to today's very special top 5 board gaming video about vampires. Before I get started, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those, you can interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. So this particular topic was recommended by Johnson Joseph Rosario, and I'm excited to do it for this Halloween. So what are we talking about? Games that involve vampires. That's pretty much all it boils down to. Really super simple, right? We're going to dive right into it, but before I do, please let me know any and all thoughts you have in the comments below. Do you find this to be super gimmicky like zombies have become? Do you still enjoy them? Do you only look for the mechanically fun aspects? All of that kind of stuff. You guys know I love to hear from you. Put anything and everything in the comments. That said, without further ado, we're going to get started with my number 5. At number 5, I've got Bloodbound, a relatively unknown social deduction game about vampires. Essentially, everybody is playing on one of two teams of vampires with the goal of killing the other leader. It plays relatively similarly to Bang in terms of you got certain cards that give you specific information about other players, and you're trying to find out who's on your team and, more importantly, who is not on your team. This is so low on the list, though, because honestly, it's not that great of a game. It's from Fantasy Flight, so I was a little bit surprised. It's pretty good, but the biggest issue I have with it is you need a ton of players to play it. The minimum number of players on this is 6, which is not uncommon for social deduction games, but at the same time, the art is actually pretty decent. It's very gothic and spooky and all that kind of stuff, but the gameplay itself is relatively shallow, as you might expect with a social deduction game. Overall, though, it's really not that bad. Bloodbound, my number 5. At number 4, I've got One Night Ultimate Vampire. And I know, right on the heels of saying, hey, this is a social deduction game that's pretty shallow, let's talk about a social deduction game. The thing is that the One Night series I actually have really enjoyed consistently. It's a lot of fun. There are so many characters that you can have some great power adaptations and shifting and moving and interactions and all of that kind of different stuff. And so the Vampire Edition adds a lot more of that, and it's really fun. I haven't played the Alien one, but that said, the Vampire one's pretty good. It adds some really unique and fun powers, and when combined with One Night Ultimate Werewolf, it makes for an even funner and spookier gameplay style. I have to do that because it's Halloween. Either way, One Night Ultimate Vampire is my number 4. At number 3, I've got Buffy Legendary, or is it Legendary Buffy the Vampire Slayer? One of those two. Essentially, this is a member of the Legendary deck building series that is based off of the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And honestly, I was really surprised at how good this was, because I am very used to things from TV shows, movies, video games, and things like that just not being very much fun. And the Buffy one is actually pretty good. That said, the Legendary system itself is really solid, and all they did was just build off of that and turn it into a Buffy themed thing. So obviously you have a lot of various vampires, you've got a lot of really cool tools. If you saw the show back in the 90s, then you are going to be very familiar with a lot of it. The reason it's sort of middle of this list is exactly because of that, though. If you're unfamiliar with the source material, you probably won't have as good of a time with it. It is a reasonably solid deck builder, but knowing at least some of the material is kind of helpful. That said, Buffy Legendary is my number 3. At number 2, I've got Dungeons & Dragons Castle Ravenloft. For those of you who are unaware, Ravenloft is essentially a separate plane of existence within the Dungeons & Dragons universe. It is ruled by none other than the vampire Strahd. And essentially, in the game Castle Ravenloft, you are going and trying to track him down. So you're fighting against little baby vampires, bats, all sorts of those very stereotypical vampire-y things. This is a great example of a really good adventure-y, RPG, dungeon crawler, the treasure grabbing, all sorts of different stuff like that type of game. I think they did a good job with translating the information from the D&D game onto the game, or from the D&D tabletop game into the board game, but similarly to Buffy, if you're not familiar with the material, then it might not be as good for you, but I personally find to be these dungeon crawling styles of games to be a little bit more forgiving in terms of you not knowing the information, and so that's why it's higher up on the list. But regardless, Castle Ravenloft is my number 2. At number 1, I've got Fury of Dracula. That sounded more like the Count, but that's beside the point. Fury of Dracula, my number one. Essentially, in this game, everybody except one person is playing as a vampire hunter, tracking down the one person who is playing as Dracula. The person playing as Dracula is utilizing hidden movement to jump around the board, and sow deceit and fear throughout the population, trying to win, while the hunters are trying to track down Dracula and kill him. By far, this is the most strategically interesting of the games on this list, and that's why it's number one. I love the strategy of it. I love the replayability just in terms of being able to play on one team or the other, and I also love the fact that you've got some various cards that allow you to sort of scale the difficulty one way or the other to make it easier or harder on either team. It's a lot of fun. It does a wonderful job of giving you the immersion and the feeling of actually hunting down and the original story from Bram Stoker and all of that kind of thing. Wonderful game. Highly recommend that you try it, but make sure to plan ahead and definitely read through the rules very carefully. They are not very well written. Either way, Fury of Dracula is my number one. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this Halloween special with my 5 favorite vampire-themed board games. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear what you guys have to say, particularly on the sense of, do you find this to be really gimmicky at this point? You know, we've got all of the games becoming zombie-like, and are vampires doing the same thing? It seems like they kind of are, but at the same time, not as badly. So I'm really curious what you guys have to say. Do you enjoy these games? Do you not enjoy them? Do you find them to be too gimmicky? Let me know anything and everything in the comments below, because you know I love to hear from you. That said, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Have a very happy and safe Halloween, and I will see you next time.